Eventually, I fell down and must have lost consciousness. When I woke up, I no longer felt like I was asleep, for I was not in the least refreshed. There was a taste of bile in my mouth. I was shivering from lying in the dewy grass without a jacket. My clothes were soaked with dew. My eyes glazed over from the tears I had shed. When I wiped them, they were dry and itchy. Maybe I'd have an allergic reaction to something and die choking when my throat swelled up. No, I couldn't be that lucky. Finally, I looked around to get my bearings. I was definitely not in a cave or Superman's fortress of solitude. I was in a turning corner on a farm. For those who don't know what that is, I'll tell you that it's a place where the irrigation system can't hit a corner. Farmers sometimes plant cover crops there, but this farmer had turned the place back into a prairie, and the native grass was about 2 feet tall, thick and very wet from dew. I realized I was only about a mile from my apartment, as it was on the edge of town in a new apartment complex. I know I had run many miles, but since I wasn't trying to run in a straight line, I slowly veered to the left and almost ran a lap. What luck that I got away and almost made it home. I wonder what Freud would say about that. A car drove down the paved county road that bordered the field, and I ducked back into the tall grass. I have no idea who was in the car, but for some reason it seemed to me that two lovers would be trying to find me. It suddenly dawned on me why the partnership contract was so onerous. Tony thought she was the one who decided everything. If I tried to give in to her in any way, slow down, go public, divorce Connie, kick them out, or do anything else, she would destroy me and my career. At least that's what she thinks. She should have waited for her lawyer to review the agreement. So now what? What's my next move? I fumbled in my pocket and found my wallet and cell phone. The battery was dead, so I had no idea how many missed calls and texts I might have. I also figured that with a dead battery, the phone would be untraceable, even by the police. I guess I didn't need to charge my phone for a while. I sat down in the grass so that only my head was visible from the road. Since it was a Monday, the traffic was quite busy. People were traveling to work in the city. Sitting still was not conducive to drying out my clothes, so I waited until the morning rush was over and then headed for the road ditch. I moved back toward town facing traffic so that I would be able to step off the narrow curb when a car pulled up to it. I certainly didn't want to get hit. It would have been lucky to survive, but to be badly injured and unable to get away from that couple. As I walked, I tried to think of ways to make them pay for their treachery. Maybe I should get a gun and shoot them both in the groin. Nope, fast track to jail. Maybe I should get in my car and run them down as they were leaving the restaurant? Nope, again, that was a fast track to jail. I'd tried many ways to get revenge, but I'd never figured out how to avoid jail. It was complicated by the fact that Tony was the one who had been socializing with the local rich and famous to build a business. I was just a designer and figured I had little to no political clout. Maybe I should divorce Connie. I mentally reasoned about it. If I sued her, I'd have to pay for all the attorney's fees, hers and mine. That was a common complaint of friends whose marriages failed. The one who sues pays all the costs. Several friends, both male and female, have been financially and emotionally broken as spouses fought their divorce to the last. No, why give her what she wants? Then she would get most of our assets and could marry Tony. That's what Tony wanted too. Why else would she go after my wife than to take her away from me? Deep in thought, I almost didn't hear the clatter of wheels on the road and almost hit the mirrors of a huge pickup truck driving by. Only the honk of the horn made me look up in time to take a step to the side and almost fall into the ditch. This was where I needed to keep my cool. The mile to the condo didn't take long enough to make a decision. I was still debating my near and distant future in my mind as I approached the corner, located on the next street over from my former home. I stopped and peered behind the nearest building. Luckily, all I saw was my car parked in front of my once happy home, now turned into an empty building. How to approach it now? I needed clothes and toiletries. Well, maybe not a razor. Now I didn't need to maintain a clean-shaven look. Maybe a goatee would look good. I smiled, imagining lamb chops on my narrow face. Maybe I still had a sense of humor. Stepping off the sidewalk, I quickly headed straight down the front of the townhouses to my car. I quickly unlocked it, started it, and moved it to a place where it couldn't be locked. I then went back to the condo for my personal belongings. Thankfully, there was no critters in there. There was a note on the desk, but I ignored it. Instead of a suitcase, I took my bags. The bags were much easier to maneuver if I needed to leave the house in a hurry. Soon, I had everything I needed for a few days. Unless she changed the locks, I would be able to go inside when I needed to grab some more clothes. The camera and laptop with their respective chargers were in the bags. It took a few trips to the car. I took my belongings in order of importance so that in the event of an alarm, I could hastily remove them. I didn't need the pictures. I looked at the various drawings and then went to check on Connie. It was missing. What a surprise. I guess it was now hanging prominently in Tony's house. This hardened my heart even more. Time to go. I headed to the local branch of our bank, where I quickly set up a new account and transferred half of our savings and funds there. This would give me some respite. I then stopped by Walmart to pick up a track cell phone. Activating it, I called Jerry Caldwell, my attorney, and brought him up to speed. We now knew why this partnership had been proposed and why it was so onerous. Jerry asked if I was going to get a divorce right away and confirmed my assumptions about what would happen. I've decided to ghost for a while until I figure out what I really want to do. I know that I was way off the mark in my 33 years, so there was a distinct possibility that I would want to have a wife again if I could overcome my fear of rejection and humiliation. He asked me to come into the office, and I signed a power of attorney for medical and financial affairs. Connie had no right to decide what would happen to me if I suddenly became incapacitated. I could even forbid her from seeing me if I ended up in the hospital for any reason. That eased my anxiety a bit, as I didn't want to see her in the near future, or maybe forever. Back in the car, I put my old cell phone on the charger I always kept there. I had one more thing to do before I turned into a ghost. Stopping for a snack at one of the fast food places, I turned on my phone and waited for messages and missed calls to stop beeping and notifications before sending my message. It was addressed to my boss, Tony Lapiro. Short and simple. I'm quitting immediately. Send Constance my last check with vacation and sick leave balances. Do not attempt to contact me. This phone will be disconnected as soon as possible. Another short and simple message was sent to my wife. You can contact me through my attorney, Jerry Caldwell. He has my power of attorney in case you need or want to dispose of the apartment. I've transferred half of our checking and savings accounts to a separate account. Hitting the send button, I took the battery out of my phone and tossed the whole thing in the nearest trash can. I then called my cell phone provider and gave up my phone. This will save Constance money every month. So where should I go? There were still clothes and other things in the apartment, but I figured they were just things. I could replace everything and probably live without it all. I needed a job and a place to hang my hat, even though I don't wear it that often. I couldn't rent a room in a motel, at least a decent one, because they would require a credit card. Constance could track me down if she wanted to, and that would lead to something I wasn't ready for yet. A confrontation. I was still a wounded animal looking for a place to lick my wounds. I knew I shouldn't try to get a job as a graphic designer, at least locally. Maybe I should hang my shingles and become a one-man store. Maybe later, but right now I just needed something to keep me busy and make some money to live on. I didn't feel like wasting fuel on the road, so I went to the county park on the river about 3 miles out of town. There, I could park under a tree and sit in the shade, contemplating my next steps. I still wanted to hurt Tony somehow, but at the moment I couldn't think of a way to do it. Late that night, I did decide to call Jennifer White at the office. When I was put through to her, I got straight to the point. Jen, this is Cal Sanders. I just wanted you to know that I resigned this morning. Tony did something so vile to me that I can't stay there. Whatever she says about me leaving, it's only because she seduced my wife and wants to get her for herself. I will miss you all and my work, but like I said, I can't stay there. Jennifer hurriedly replied, Cal, I'm sorry. I didn't recognize the number you called from. Should I keep it a secret? Yes, please. I got rid of my old cell phone and will never use that number again. I'm also leaving town as soon as I decide on a destination. I probably won't be making any more calls. Well, let me bring you up to speed. After Tony must have gotten your resignation letter, it was like she went crazy. She ranted and screamed for quite a while until she finally called a meeting. She said you were taking some time off and that she would get you back to work as soon as she contacted her attorney. I don't know what she meant by that. I just know that nothing seems to get done today without your input. I know you're all good at your jobs. You'll do just fine without me. I had to leave my phone conversation with Jennifer as Jerry was trying to reach me. Cal, it's already starting. I was just contacted by Miss Lapiro's attorney. He demands that you return to work immediately, or the contract penalties will be enforced to the fullest extent. I have to say, I almost burst out laughing when he called. I don't know if he is either incompetent or just not paying attention. I told him he needed to reread the partnership agreement. I thought he was going to have a stroke because I didn't agree to send you back to Zapiro's. He continued, and I chuckled. The grief of losing my marriage didn't stop me from seeing the humor in what was going on. Also, I have been contacted by one Constance Reynolds Sanders. She wishes to give you some messages. Are you prepared to receive them? No, I have nothing to say to her, nor do I need her platitudes. The whole thing is still too raw. I'll put them all in your personnel file. When you're ready to read them, I'll send them to you or email them to you if you so prefer. I agreed, and he excused himself, saying he would contact me again after he got the information from Tony or her attorney. He was still chuckling, anticipating the fireworks. I got out of the car and walked along the riverbank. Where it sloped down to the water, I stopped and just watched. Small twigs floated by. On the calmer stretches, where the water was slowly bubbling near the shore, small water bugs skipped by. I tossed a couple small twigs into the stream. The water was moving faster in the center of the river than near the edge. I sat down and thought about how this happened. I didn't care why, I just tried not to think or remember. I thought Connie was going to be my partner in life and for life. We had grown so close over the years. I hoped we would become like my grandparents, so close that no one would even think of one without automatically thinking of the other. The complete harmony at the end of their lives made them happy and content until the very end. I don't know how long it took to reach that state, but it was the only way I ever knew them. Now, however, I found that I did not know her at all. She could have betrayed me and had betrayed me without feeling any guilt. If she had come to me in the beginning and told me she was thinking of having a relationship with a woman, I might have just granted her wishes. No, it was the sneaking around, and Tony's conversations in which she enticed me with her affair. Both showed extreme disrespect for me. I needed to do something, anything, before I let this whole situation overwhelm me. But where to go and what to do? Finally, a rational thought occurred to me. Why not do something so out of the ordinary that I would be even harder to track down? Typing Belldairy's number into a search engine, I called Nancy. Hi, Nancy. This is Cal Sanders from Zapiro's. How are you today? We exchanged pleasantries, and then I got down to business. I'm looking to expand my horizons a bit. Don't you have an opening for a city boy who wants to learn more about agriculture? I think expanding my knowledge base would be good for my job, and considering the area we live in. She immediately agreed and inquired when I could join them. I told her tomorrow, and she was excited. Cal, that's great. All of us in agriculture, especially in the livestock industry, are in a constant battle with vegans and vegetarians for all the misinformation they spread about how animals are used for food. You could be a great spokesperson for the industry. Although I doubted I could be a spokesperson, I knew I could direct any future design work toward fighting misinformation. Since it was getting dark, I decided to head out to the rural community where the dairy was located. If need be, I could drive all night. This turned out not to be too optimistic. Around 3 a.m., I was close to Renardville, my destination, but dozing off at times. Fortunately, there was little traffic. I finally pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, moved into the passenger seat, and leaned back. The jacket became my blanket, and soon I was asleep. For the second night in a row, I was homeless and couldn't find a bed to lay my exhausted body on. At least I wouldn't wake up with soaked clothes. Shortly after dawn, I woke up awake and sore. I got out of the car and walked around the parking lot, then stopped at a diner for breakfast before heading to the dairy farm. Jim liked my work on his logo and was proud to wear Flossie on his t-shirts, but doubted I could be an effective member of his team. So I worked hard and asked thousands of questions, because I had no farming experience that could help me. Over the next weeks and then a few months, I learned first how to clean stalls, then moved on to using a small loader to load dried manure into a self-propelled spreader. I would then head out to the fields to spread the manure as organic fertilizer. Sometimes it had to be supplemented with other fertilizers. I helped clean the sewer system that carried urine to the sump. The sump was crusted over, and I was warned many times not to fall over the railing, as the bacteria in the crust could be fatal if it got into a wound or mouth. I progressed further and further up the ladder where I was to do the milking, and then perhaps learn how to process the milk before it arrived in a tanker to be transported to the factory. During this time, I heard from Jim several times. The first time was about a court hearing regarding a partnership agreement. For some reason, the copy that Tony's attorney had was missing the last page with IP-Free's signature, and the entire revised agreement, except for the signature page, was missing. Our answer to the lawsuit included a complete copy of the agreement for the judge to review before the hearing. This should be fun. The second contact from Jim concerned Connie. She was selling the condo and wanted me to go along with it. I provided this to Jerry since he already had my proxy. I didn't care what she did. I decided that she would move in with Tony. Jerry relayed to me the request to contact her. I just didn't know why she hadn't started divorce proceedings yet, but I certainly wasn't going to initiate contact with her. I then received a text message from Jennifer White. She was fed up with Tony, and she was not alone in her displeasure. According to her, after I left, Tony had turned into a nasty autocrat. Work was suffering and clients were unhappy with the results. I regretted this because the people Tony had were very good and could very well do very good work. Sometimes dissatisfaction with the boss carries over to the results of the work. She also informed me that my deputy would be someone I knew very well. Tony had invited Connie to be her partner and chief designer. It was a little funny. Connie had education, but lacked design flair and imagination. In addition, she had no executive experience. A couple days later, Jennifer texted and asked when I was going to open a new store. The entire team was ready to leave without warning. She believed that Connie and Tony were almost intentionally trying to make the team's lives so miserable that they would contact me and try to get me back. Her words were, "Tony goes around all day saying, 'If only Cal was here, there wouldn't be any problems.'" She also said that Connie just sits alone, if only in the office with Tony since no one wants to talk to her. The whole team figured out the relationship between the two, and everyone was not happy. Jennifer didn't try to talk me into coming back. Then it was time for the partnership hearing. Jerry informed me that I had to attend. Although the judge would likely rule in my favor, if I didn't attend, he could charge me for it. I made sure to keep my goatee groomed. My hair was pretty shaggy by then, as I was too busy to go to the barber. But heck, why mess around with my hair if I wore a cap all day? I lived in a bunkhouse on a dairy farm, so there was a definite bovine odor in my suit, even though I had showered that morning. Since the hearing was at 9 in the morning, I left the dairy at 4, so I could make the 4-hour drive to the site and unwind a bit. By the time we entered the courtroom, my suit was a little wrinkled. Connie and Tony were seated along with Tony's attorney. Connie looked a little, how shall I put it, pregnant. It had been a few months since I had left and she already had a little belly. I was wondering who the donor was. Yes, I'm sure she was going to claim it was me. Too bad, but until she divorces me, I'm not obligated to support her offspring. Tony seemed pretty pissed off. I decided to go in with my lawyer, smiling in counterbalance. I may look like a hayseed, but that doesn't mean I can't be happy. I threw a brief glance at both of them as we sat down, but from then on, I was facing the judge. The hearing went about as we expected. First, the judge reprimanded her lawyer for coming up with such a cheesy agreement. Then the judge gave them both a chance to withdraw the petition or face perjury charges. Tony's lawyer couldn't have settled any faster if you shot him out of a cannon. I'm guessing he only filed at her insistence. God only knows what she thought she was getting out of it. Maybe she thought she could talk to me and tell me what an asshole I was. After passing judgment, Jerry and I stood up and headed for the exit. Connie jumped out in front of us. Wait, Cal, I need to talk to you. I'm pregnant and you're the father. When are you coming home? I didn't answer anything. Then she got a little confused and grabbed me by my funky lapels. Please, I'm your wife and I have rights. You need to talk to me. I need you here by my side. Come home and let's work this out. I twisted her arms enough that she let me go. The bailiff was watching closely. You have no right to talk to me. None whatsoever. By the way, you sold our house, so there's no home to go talk to. Get a lawyer and file for divorce, then I might have to talk to you. I think you're in a hurry to marry your whore. By the way, make her pay for your offspring. I don't know why you think I'm the father. You'll have to prove it to me. She tried to grab me again. I looked at the bailiff. Doesn't that constitute battery? Or is it assault or false imprisonment? I don't want that woman touching me at any time. He hurriedly walked over and led Connie away. All this time, Tony just stood still. Finally, she spoke up. I can't understand why you would be so cruel to a woman who loves you. What kind of person are you? I'm the kind of person who doesn't share. I'm the kind of man who refuses to forgive sins against him when the sinners feel no guilt. I'm the kind of man who finally takes off the blinders and sees bitches for what they are. Bitches and whores who betray others. I'm also the kind of guy who doesn't want to talk to anyone who did him wrong ever again in his life. I walked out of the courtroom, headed to my car, and returned to the only home I had left. One where cows and most people weren't judged. Nancy and Jim Bell had become sort of surrogate parents, or at least kind aunts and uncles since I'd come to work for them. I explained to them why I was on the run, so to speak, and why I didn't want to pursue design in the near future. They understood, but didn't quite agree with me. Apparently, Nancy really wanted me to be an industry spokesperson. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I still kept my sketch pad next to my bed. The rooms in the cabin were small, but there was privacy. Quite often I'd fall asleep late with ideas in my head, or wake up at odd hours to do some sketching. Yes, the ideas came about a campaign for the dairy industry involving Flossie. Nancy and Jim needed someone else to be the lead, someone with a recognizable name. That person also had to be camera-friendly. That, of course, wasn't me. One day I mentioned that I had some ideas for supporting the dairy industry, and Nancy almost jumped in surprise. What do you have? When can I see it? You have to let us in. I smiled at her. Soon. I'm working up concepts so you can hand it to whoever you want. A milk or beef tip would be good for starters, as it can be adapted to any animal. You could even substitute chicken or pig and deliver the same thing. Right now, it shows Flossie on it. When the storyboard is complete, the ad agency can take it and bring it to life. They will find the right celebrity voice for the narration and the right looks for the model. I won't copyright it, so there's nothing stopping you from using the entire design as you see fit. She hugged me until I reminded her that I had a paying job to get back to. She smirked and clapped me on the back. Like your boss is going to fire you. Fine, go to work and take care of this project. Jerry finally got the paperwork regarding the separation agreement. Connie was demanding a lot of alimony. I refused, and he sent the papers back unsigned. Then, the divorce papers came, and now she was demanding even more money and spousal counseling. Jim objected that she had a relationship with Tony and that I did not recognize the parentage. a request for DNA was made. The judge deferred the matter until after the birth of the child. The potential child support amount was reduced because of my low salary. I was making no more than minimum wage at my dairy job. I received room and board pay that was not included on my income tax return, so it didn't show up on any divorce papers. Anyway, I finished the storyboard and pitched all my ideas to the Bells. They joined the dairy board, made their presentation, and it was unanimously accepted. Soon, the money was allocated. Some of my drawings of Flossie were going to be used as models in CGI animation. To voice Flossie, they found a country music star who had grown up on a dairy farm, who was well aware of how hard it was to fight the vegan crowd. Another celebrity with a deep country accent was chosen to voice the other parts. And then came the ultimate surprise. They chose a former model, now heavily pregnant, to be the center of attention for this and future commercials. Yes, Constance Reynolds Sanders was to be the face of the dairy industry. Nancy explained that they were going to do a lot of pictures and video clips of her, a pregnant woman, consuming dairy products to help the fetus develop. After the baby was born, commercials would be made showing the benefits of dairy products for the baby's development. Nancy knew that the baby might turn out to be mine, but that didn't interfere with their plans. If Constance's baby didn't fit the role, they would search for a suitable star who could grow into a model child if necessary. The Bells didn't hesitate to tell anyone who asked where the campaign came from, even though I didn't copyright the material or ask for compensation. One day, my bosses at the Dairy Council delivered a check for $10,000, and other meat councils sent representatives to discuss with me how to adapt my ideas to their needs. I soon needed an office, as the small bedroom in the dairy was too small to conduct business and sleep in. The bellhops bailed me out again. There was an old, small commercial building in Reynardville that had been vacant for a long time. I don't want to say how long, but first of all, I needed to replace some small windows and get the birds and vermin out before I could start cleaning. The Bells wisely told me that I had no more work with them unless my new project worked out. They did so with a smile and a comment that I needed to get back to doing what I do best. I registered the name Agri Design Solutions, contacted my banker and accountant to open the appropriate bank accounts and get the appropriate tax numbers for the business. A check for $10,000 was deposited into the new account. My phone number was listed as the number for the business. I also made sure I had quick access to the internet so I could respond to emails or text messages on other meat boards as needed. Early one morning, I put on my dirty clothes as I needed to do some deep cleaning in my new office space. Fortunately, it also had a small apartment that I was going to live in the near future. I was surprised when I unlocked the door and saw that the space was not only shiny from the cleaning fairies, but also filled with mismatched office furniture. It seemed that at least 10 people could comfortably work here, and there was still room for conferences and meetings. As I stepped outside, I was completely at a loss for words and realized that there was a new sign painted on the front window announcing that this was the home of Agri Design Solutions. I walked back into the house and headed for the living area. I assumed I would have to spend all day cleaning up in there, but again I was amazed at the transformation. Everything had been cleaned and the space was filled with used but very sturdy furniture. I also had guests coming over. Nancy and Jim stood there with huge grins on their faces. They quickly introduced me to the mayor and the head of the Area Chamber of Commerce, who organized the cleaning and furnishing of the space. As the mayor said, "We live in a dying city. Any new business needs all the support we can give." The head of the Chamber of Commerce seconded that statement and handed me a list. "These are local farmers and ranchers who want to talk to you as soon as possible. They've seen the Bells branding themselves and want to join their ranks." He pointed to one name. "This lady is on the Soy Advocacy Board and wants to discuss how to better market soybeans. Even though vegans are in favor of soy, the average person has a negative perception of it." I was humbled and stunned. "I thank you all, but I'm just one person. I don't know if I can fit it all in quickly. I also thank you for furnishing the space to make it look like there are several people working here, but I don't think that's possible right now. I just started a business after all." Nancy pulled herself together. I don't think you'll have any trouble getting help, because I've been in touch with one of your former coworkers. You remember Jennifer, don't you? I nodded. So, Zapiro appears to be in big trouble. The last payroll didn't go through and all the employees are gone. According to Jen, without your guidance and inspiration, everything fell apart. That's why we brought Constance on board. She saw the writing on the wall and left. Unfortunately, she maintains her personal relationship with, what's her name? Oh yeah, Tony. But she doesn't work there anymore. She took a breath while I comprehended this news and then continued. Long story short, as soon as I told her you were starting a new design company, she wanted to know how to join it. She and a few others will be here tomorrow. The rest of your old team is working on either moving here, even in vans if necessary, or working remotely through Zoom. I needed to sit down. Luckily, the dining chair was sturdy and I collapsed onto it. I couldn't find my voice, trying to line up all my comments and concerns. It's one thing to start a new business as the sole owner and sole employee, but having multiple employees, some of whom are moving a considerable distance, on your first day of business is very daunting. How should I proceed? I voiced my concerns. Nancy waved her hand at me as if it wasn't worthy of discussion. I have someone who will help you get started on the job. She'll be here later if you'd like to talk to her. The others apparently knew of this person, as they all nodded in agreement. I nodded in agreement. The mayor quickly got on the phone. Looks like I need to take some kind of command. Everyone chuckled as I continued. Do we have any coffee here? I think we should all have a cup and then head to the lovely meeting area I saw in the front, where we can sit and relax while discussing all you've accomplished. I was used to small-town life, but I was unprepared for what happened next. The mayor's call brought a huge group of people to my new business office. Coffee, tea, and lemonade were soon on the table, and cakes and Danish pastries of all kinds were on another table. People came and went throughout the morning, all with the same welcome message. Names were called. A few I recognized from the list of potential customers. Most of them told me they wanted to talk business when I was ready. Finally, the mayor, Tom Blevins, brought in a particular person to introduce me to. Cal, this is my daughter, Emily Tocklin. She is very qualified to help run your business and has just moved from Detroit to live here. I believe she may be the person you need. Again, I was speechless for a few moments. You remember Constance, my wife? She's a beautiful woman with a modeling career. Emily is no match for Connie. I regretted not bringing a notebook because I needed to capture the essence of this true vision of beauty. And when I started talking to her, she had no idea what kind of vision she was. She was the most down-to-earth and organized person I had ever met. We sat among a crowd of well-wishers and had a deep conversation about how and where I plan to grow this company. She immediately made a to-do list of things that needed to be accomplished for us to really get started. As we talked, I felt right at home with her. We also discussed my marital status and the reasons for it, and she informed me that she had just left her husband when he came home and stated that he wanted to move to a bigger house where he could bring his 2 girlfriends to live with them all. He wanted her to call these women sister wives and for them all to share and share equally. Emily disagreed and moved out the next day and returned to Renardville. Her divorce was recently finalized. She had 2 young children to take care of, but her mother was helping with childcare so she could focus on agri-design solutions. We decided to hold off on salary discussions until later, as the rest of the town still wished us well. The next day, Jennifer and 3 others showed up for work. We didn't have full internet access yet. The cable guys seemed to take forever to install the equipment and connect the room, but we were able to use a tablet to communicate with the others. One of my main goals was to get to know new and potential customers better than just a quick meeting. Immersing myself in the dairy business helped inspire me to create an advertising campaign. I offered to do the same with each client. The designer assigned to the client was to work in that area until the business was well researched. He would then design for that company. Some disagreed, But when I talked about my ideas for the milk board and how it was the springboard for this new company, everyone had to admit that my idea had merit. As we continued to work, it soon became clear who was and was not supportive of my direction. I introduced Emily as the office manager and talked about how her job would change as we moved forward. I honestly admitted that I was not a business person, and she had experience that would help us not burn out if we just partnered with her. Emily then took over the meeting and got to work on how timesheets and expense reports would be kept and filed. Lists of potential clients, starting with other meat boards, were sent out, and teams were created to see if my original idea would work or if we would start from scratch and come up with exciting and dynamic campaigns for each organization. It didn't take long for our new teams to get to work. At least one member of each team went incognito to learn about the industry as quickly as possible. This gave us new and interesting insights into each genre, which was reflected in the proposed campaigns. The beef and pork councils each committed $10,000 to make their campaigns a priority. This gave us a little breathing room for labor and other expenses. We also quickly placed logos at some small local businesses and farms, which brought in a few dollars to help. I knew this was inevitable since I could no longer keep my location a secret, so I wasn't surprised when the bell over the front door rang one morning and my soon-to-be ex-wife made herself known. One of her commercials had aired, and I figured she was now a celebrity and expected special treatment. I was surprised when she didn't act like a diva, but simply asked if she could see me. Emily came out to intervene when I was in the conference area with a new client and frantically sketching out ideas. She had already realized that I needed to focus on my work, and she needed to focus on running the business. At the beginning of the day, we would meet and discuss how we thought the day would go. At the end of the day, we would meet again to criticize and work on solutions. I think the conversation started like this. Hello, my name is Emily. I'm a business manager. How can I help you? I'd like to speak to Cal, please. I'm sorry, but he's busy with a client right now. Did you have an appointment? Emily later recounted that Constance smiled regretfully at that question. No, I was hoping that if I just came in, he would talk to me. I don't think he would ever make an appointment for me. I'm sorry, but I'm a little confused. Why did he refuse to meet with you? I'm his wife. Oh, that explains a lot. Please have a seat. Do you need an extra cushion to sit on? It had to do with Constance's late pregnancy. I guess Emily knew from experience that the old tailbone sometimes gets tender when the fetus increases in size. Emily stayed close by to see if Constance needed anything. She brought her a glass of water and some coffee cake. Several older women from the church were so impressed with our new company that they brought us pastries or coffee cake every day. I was thinking of organizing a gym so we wouldn't turn into couch potatoes. Constance and Emily were making small talk. I was so engrossed in my client that I didn't notice her show up. I assume Cal told you about our relationship problems. Emily replied, Cal and I exchanged marital stories on the first day we met when we were discussing how I could help him with the business. There has been no comment since, even when we saw the dairy commercials. She paused. He seemed pleased that you portrayed a mother-to-be using his ideas to promote the industry. Actually, I was trying to impress him. His ideas are very good and should help paint a more realistic picture for the consumer. Do you know how he gets his inspiration? He seems to be very knowledgeable about the industry. Emily gave a quick smile. I think he went to work at the local dairy after he left his last employer. He cleaned stalls, cleaned milking machines, spread manure, and then spread it over the fields. I think that might explain his background. Also, his former employers are good friends and visit him every time they come to town. They have a lot of experience in the field and will answer any question. Constance seemed surprised that I was doing manual labor as described. She had always known me as an artist and graphic designer. She looked around. Is it just Cal and you working here? I see a bunch of empty desks. How's business going? Emily smiled again. Are you asking for you or your lover? From what I understand, she closed her business and is working as an entry-level designer for her old company. Do you want him to succeed here, or do you hope he follows her path? By the way, what's her name? Constance seemed to blush slightly. I'm curious because I want him to succeed. He left, actually ran away, when I tried to assure him that I loved him despite his looks. I never meant to hurt him. I just fell in love with another man, someone I felt the same deep love for as I did for Cal. He just couldn't stop himself from trying to understand and accept. She paused to see how Emily would take her comment. Her name is Tony, by the way. And how has your relationship been lately? Do you two still get along like newlyweds? Constance's face must have turned red then. We've had some problems. With Cal leaving, there's been some friction between us. The pregnancy didn't help. We had planned to work things out for a few years before I got pregnant, but he overcame my birth control and now we're going to have a daughter. We, meaning you and Tony, or we, meaning you and Cal? Actually, in a perfect world, it would be Cal, Tony, and me, and we would love her the way three parents should love her. Emily seemed to start laughing. I heard her and looked over to see who she was talking to. I tried to keep her presence out of the way of my clients, for they didn't deserve the drama that was about to unfold in a few minutes. I couldn't hear what Emily was saying to Constance, but I could see the facial expressions. It foreshadowed a contentious reunion. As I said, I didn't hear their conversation. Emily responded to Constance's outrageous comment about all three of us having to be the parents of her future baby girl. You know, you're almost as delusional as my ex-husband. He wanted me to be part of a harem and for his whores to have an equal say in the raising of our children. I left him so fast he's still going crazy. I haven't known Cal that long, but I know he would never have agreed to your perfect life. How long have you been married to him? Do you even know him? I think that was the end of the conversation. From my seat, I heard my favorite wife say, I think you've had enough. Tell my husband I'm here, and I have to talk to him. I thought she was going to stomp her foot like a child who has been told he can't eat a piece of candy. Her look was thunderous. I don't think a spike in blood pressure was healthy for her pregnant state, but what do I know? I ignored her. I had clients to work with at the moment. If she didn't like it, she could make an appointment like everyone else did. I turned to my clients again. They raised Simmental beef and wanted their brand to showcase that. I offered to do a profile of one of their bulls with the branding and ranch name in the center of the side of the beef. I made sure that the profile was really one of their bulls so that it was authentic and not just clip art. Once I had a good sketch on a sketch pad, we agreed to the concept. We went up, I shook their hands and promised to do a color example on the computer in a few days. Then they would make a final decision. After they left, I took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. It was time for the final confrontation. Thankfully, Tony wasn't accompanying Constance to Reynardville. I walked over to the chair Constance was sitting in. I didn't greet her as I didn't want to see her. Constance, why are you here? I told you to have all of our conversations through our attorneys. The divorce is on hold until you give birth. Then there will be a parentage determination, and I will pay you child support if it is proven that the child is mine. Actually, she is, Cal. She's going to be a beautiful baby. Don't you want to hold your own daughter in your arms? No, as long as you or Tony have the right to decide how to raise her. I don't think you're a good enough role model to raise any child, and after Tony and you screwed me over, I don't think she should be around any child at any time. God only knows what ethics and morals you two will teach her. I see nothing but destruction in her future. That's why you need to come home, Cal. You could teach her and show her ethics in action. You could be the one person to set her on the right path. Yes, I would have been her nanny and caregiver while you and Tony flaunt your loose morals and lack of ethics every day. Sorry, but no thanks. You're just going to abandon your child? So you say. I promise you I haven't had another man since we became exclusive. Yes, I know how good your promises are. You once promised to leave everyone else, and now you can't live without your new love. We'll just wait and see if you've had any other man besides me. You know that's not true. I would never cheat on you. I had to laugh. If it's not cheating, then what is it? But I love her and she loves me. It can't be cheating if you're doing it with the person you love. I shook my head. She was deluded, plain and simple. You can't argue with a delusion like that. It could drive you crazy. I don't think we have anything to discuss. You need to leave. If you don't, I will have you removed for trespassing. I have no intention of seeing you again. From now on, send your comments through my attorney. I will have him forward them to me. I don't promise to respond. But your daughter will be born soon. We need you at home, both Tony and I, and your daughter. I want you to be in the delivery room with me when she's born. Will Tony be there too? Of course, she will be Jenny's second mom and my birth coach. She should be there. If there's one person I want to see less than you, it's my former boss. No, I won't be there. Get a DNA test done as soon as possible, and I'll provide my sample without argument or delay. If it's mine, I'll pay court-ordered child support. I warn you that I don't make much money, as the business is still new and just starting to turn a profit. Hell, I wasn't even allowed to pick a baby name. It had already been decided by two whores. I didn't voice that complaint, as she would surely inform me that among the vast number of unread messages, there was probably something about the baby's name. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of pointing out that little fact. I led her to the door. I really wanted to grab her arm and push her out, but that would have looked ugly to anyone who might see me pushing her out the door. I opened the door, and she obediently stepped out. Constance, I'm not kidding when I say I'm going to have you removed for trespassing. You don't need my services in any way, shape, or form other than possible child support. Do not come back here and do not attempt to contact me directly again. That goes for your local whore as well. Have a safe journey home. Not that I care about you, but your unborn child should be safe. I closed the door after her reply and locked it. I hoped the sound of the lock slamming shut would let her know I wasn't kidding. A few minutes later, I unlocked the door as we had appointments. A week later, Jerry called to let me know that I was the proud father of a 7-pound, 8-ounce baby girl, with blonde hair, 10 fingers and toes, and blue eyes. I wondered again about paternal ancestry, since both Constance and I have dark hair and brown eyes. I had already taken the DNA test to the lab and sent the results to Jerry. There is no way they could have tampered with my results to match little Jenny's. Once Constance gets the baby girl's DNA results, any competent doctor will be able to compare them and determine if she comes from my loins. I'd like to say that Emily and I had struck up a romantic relationship, but it was too soon to tell right now. We got along just fine. Sometimes she had to take her little ones to work with her when her mother had a conflict. We put a bench with a drawer in the conference area so they could keep their toys there and play with them. If it happened that a client had a meeting, Emily would take the kids to the apartment and they would play in the living room while Emily answered the phone with a cordless phone. Since some employees worked remotely and still lived in my old small town, we served clients in both communities and surrounding areas. The number of accounts was growing. Immersing ourselves in various business interests was also paying off. We were able to point out some of the lesser-known details of the industry to help educate the public and sell the concept at the same time. Weeks went by. Finally, Jerry filed for divorce. The DNA test results conclusively showed that I was Jenny's biological father. I was prepared to pay the ordered child support and sent a monthly check to Constance as soon as Jerry confirmed parentage. The day of the hearing came. Constance requested marriage counseling. Jerry called Constance in first and made her talk about the lesbian affair and how they kept it from me. He then called Tony and made her confess that she had been informing me of the affair as it unfolded, keeping Constance's name secret. Jerry then had each of them confess that they had tried to make me a de facto slave through the partnership agreement and in fact had finally admitted to the affair, believing that I had signed the agreement. After Jerry tore them apart in the dock, he sat down and whispered, "Do you want primary custody of the child?" I didn't know what to answer. It hadn't occurred to me that I could prevail on the child's mother. Why do you ask? Was my only response at that point as I tried to make a quick decision. Look at the judge, Jerry said. That man is furious. If he could charge them with a felony for what they did to you, he would. Now is as good a time as any to ask about it. Separate custody is at least a given. The judge really had a sour face as he listened to opposing counsel try to minimize the damage the two women had admitted to. I nodded at Jerry. That kid needs something better than those two. Take action. When it was his turn, Jerry stood up and addressed the judge. Your Honor, due to the confession of my client's wife and her lover about how they tried to manipulate him into agreeing to their unusual proposal for a living arrangement, and because this was an unplanned pregnancy that both women testified was the subject of their disagreement, my client is amending his divorce petition to include full custody of his daughter, Jenny Sanders. He is willing to grant free visitation to the child's mother, Constance Sanders, but requests that the other party to this disastrous marriage, Miss Toni Lapiro, be denied any contact with the child. That statement exploded like a grenade. All three of them, the lawyer, Constance, and Toni, jumped up and began explaining, complaining, and yelling all at the same time. For a few moments, the judge banged his gavel, demanding silence. They fell silent but remained standing. The baby was in a carrier and asleep during all of this. After a quick whispered conversation, the lawyer spoke up. Your Honor, Mr. Sanders didn't care about the baby. He resisted and ignored all communications regarding the pregnancy and subsequent birth of his own child. He refused to have anything to do with Mrs. Sanders during the difficult stages of the pregnancy and delivery. In fact, he had not seen the child prior to this hearing or even held the child in his arms. We don't believe he should be granted anything more than supervised visitation. Constance threw me a startled look and suddenly stood up. Your Honor, I want to be heard. The lawyer frantically tried to silence her and sit down, but the judge chided the lawyer and let Constance speak. Please speak, Mrs. Sanders. I warn you that you are testing my patience and treading on very thin ice. She nodded. I apologize for the confusion, Your Honor, but I do not support the idea of a father supervising a child. If it were my will, he could move home today and be the good parent I know he's capable of being. He's innocent here. I'm not ashamed of my lifestyle, but I apologize for the way Toni and I developed our relationship and our failed attempt to get Cal to accept it. The way we did it hurt him more than we intended. The judge gave the lawyer a hard look when he tried to object to his client's testimony and tapped her gavel on the wood to emphasize her displeasure. Then please tell me, Mrs. Sanders, why did you file for divorce? In your note, you indicated abandonment and callous disregard for your feelings. Did your husband threaten you or Miss Lapiro? Did he make you feel unsafe in your home? Has he hit you or done anything to hurt you in the eyes of your family or friends? Your Honor, I filed for divorce on the recommendation of my attorney and Miss Lapiro. We have not been able to get Cal to respond to all of our attempts at communication so that we can address some of the issues that Cal has. We were hoping that this would get him to go to counseling and give us a chance to let him know that he is loved and cherished by me and Toni. The pregnancy was unintentional and certainly unplanned, but if it helps him heal, it will be an additional consideration in my attempt to stay married and maintain my relationship with Toni. As for threats against me or Toni, he has done nothing more than have us kicked out of his new place of employment for trespassing. Your husband's attorney cites that the pregnancy was the cause of the disagreement between you and your lover. Is that true? Since the pregnancy was not planned, it took us some time to come to terms with it. We didn't plan on having a child for a few more years. But, like other parents who had to quickly come to terms with the news of a baby, we have accepted my daughter and are working on becoming the parents she needs. Are you talking about yourself and Mr. Sanders or yourself and Miss Lapiro? At the moment, I'm talking about myself and Miss Lapiro. I'm hoping Cal will agree to the requested visitation rights to be able to participate in her upbringing if he can't accept our relationship and move home. I whispered to my attorney. Ask her about the house, where she lives, etc. Also, why she sold the apartment when I was helping to make the payments. The judge seemed to read my mind, or at least my lips. Mrs. Sanders, where do you currently reside? I live with Tony in her apartment. Did you and your husband have separate quarters while you were living together? Yes, sir. We had a condominium that we lived in. What happened to that property? I sold it after Cal left. Why? You couldn't afford it after he left? Was it too much of a financial burden for you? She blushed. It was a bit more of a burden since Cal's income had dropped significantly, but he transferred money to our bank every month. I decided to sell the house so that Tony and I could run the household together, since we love each other very much. Did you make a profit on the sale of the house? Yes, sir. Cal and I had lived in it for 7 years, so it had accumulated a certain amount of capital. Did you share that capital with your husband? She hesitated a little and blushed with embarrassment. No. Tony's business was failing, and I became a partner. We used every means possible to keep the business from going bankrupt. It didn't work, and the business failed anyway. Tony now works for another company. He looked at the papers lying in front of him. I don't see a partnership agreement in these papers. Did you have a formal contract? No, sir. Tony and I had a gentleman's agreement. She promised that I would return everything I put into the company when it became profitable again. Did your husband know about his money being used in this venture? She shook her head. Did you try to tell your husband what you were going to do with the money from the sale of your joint home? She shook her head again. In other words, you conspired to have an illicit affair with your husband's boss, flaunted it while hiding your identity, then concocted that nasty partnership agreement to get him to approve of your intentions to change the marriage. Then, after he left, you sold joint real estate to invest the money in this same woman without an agreement, while hiding it from your husband and preventing him from knowing how the money was being used. Then you and his former boss try to force him to honor the contract you think he signed, but commit fraud when you take the case to court. Now, you want him to just say, "It's okay," and move home, to your lover's house and become what? An unpaid nanny? And this is with you flaunting your relationship with Miss Lapiro? Your Honor, Cal would not be an unpaid nanny. I will accept him with open arms as a full partner in our relationship. I want him with me where he belongs. I think I've heard enough. I'll take all of that into consideration, and I'll let you know my decision a week from today in this courtroom, the same time we started this trial. He banged his gavel and walked out of the courtroom, and we all stood in silence. I shook Jerry's hand and hurried out of the courtroom. I tried to get ahead of any attempt by Constance and Tony to interrupt me. Constance tried to take the baby in her arms and yelled at me, asking if I wanted to see my daughter. I hardened up and kept moving even though it felt like I was wading through molasses to get out of there. Jerry didn't let Tony catch up with me, just blocking the passage. I realized from the shit she was spouting that she had never been a friend, just someone to use, abuse, and then try to control for her own ends. That week, I stayed at a motel. Agri Design Solutions was already successful in the niche that Tony had carved out with Zapiro, and now it needed an office here in my old hometown. Every day, I met with the Chamber of Commerce and various realtors in search of a suitable space to hang my hat on for myself and my coworkers. Of course, they showed me the old Zapiro headquarters since it was designed for this type of business. The landlord's representative was somewhat puzzled when I refused to even walk through the door and left, telling him to look for something else for me. I had several reasons for not renting this space, and one of them was that someone might think Zapiro had reopened under a new name. Sorry, we were a new and unique business, and we didn't need old baggage dragging us down. And yes, there were too many bad memories associated with that office space for me to use it. Eventually, I settled on an old retail space like the one in Reynardville. There was a parking lot, not very big, but in a place where our name would only become known through street traffic. I called all of my local staff to come in and look at the space. We soon came up with a decor plan, including murals on the walls and special curtains for the large front windows depicting some of our work. It's amazing what you can get these days. I also ordered the same curtains for the office in Reynardville. When it was time for the final hearing, I put on a new suit and tie. I still had a goatee, but my hair was neatly trimmed, fitting my role as a businessman. I had acquired the habit of wearing a hat, so I came into the courtroom wearing a fedora. Jerry and I sat and talked softly as we waited for the judge. Constance was alone with her attorney. I guessed that Tony was babysitting or had moved the baby to an undisclosed location in case the judge ruled in my favor. Constance looked sad and dejected. What I didn't know was that the judge had issued an emergency order to the Child Protective Services office, and Constance and Tony's home had been visited. Constance felt like she was going to lose her daughter. She didn't know that CPS had also visited Agri Design Solutions in Reynardville and hit on Emily and the women in the community. When I was informed that I was being considered as a possible home for Jenny, all of the women in Reynardville came forward and said they could be potential caregivers for the child if needed. I hadn't mentioned to anyone that I might become a caregiver, as I was still reeling from the thought. Emily obviously took it for granted and soon had the second bedroom fully equipped with furniture and supplies to bring the baby safely into the apartment. I got a kick out of not informing Emily of the turn of events at the hearing. She made me smile as she gave me hell. When she told me how the residents came to the rescue, I vowed to never leave Renardville, even if our satellite office ended up doing more business than Renardville. It was humbling and gratifying to be welcomed into the community so quickly. Anyway, on to the hearing. The judge called us all to order. He solemnly announced his decision. As you both now know, I have asked the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Child Protection, to immediately investigate both of you. I needed to find out which parent would be able to provide the best environment for the child to develop and grow. Ideally, it should be both of you in a traditional family, but that is not the case in this instance. He paused and cleared his throat. The preliminary report I have doesn't say that the father, Calvin Sanders, or the mother, Constance Reynolds Sanders, would be better for this child. Now that the Department of Health has gotten involved, there will be additional site visits and investigations to make sure that whatever decision is made today is in the best interest of the child. Constance was relieved. I suppose she thought her lesbian relationship might have swayed the investigator to my side. I felt some relief myself. Taking on the role of full-time father to a child who was only a few months old was very challenging. We waited with bated breath for his final decision. I have reservations about keeping the baby in the current situation because of the chicanery, outright lies, and attempts to manipulate Mr. Sanders into being nothing more than a slave to two women who definitely did not have his best interests at heart. The lies that have been told and admitted in this courtroom make my stomach churn. If I could find a violation of the law in this marriage and breakup fiasco, I would have had the district attorney file charges against you, Mrs. Reynolds Sanders and Miss Tony Lapiro by now. I find you despicable and wonder what place your daughter will have in your lives. I also doubt Miss Lapiro will be able to influence a child when she has no remorse for stalking and seducing you and destroying Mr. Sanders' happy home. I see that she has not come to support you today. Why, Miss Reynolds? Constance's attorney quickly conferred with her client. Your Honor, Miss Lapiro is watching the baby today, as it was thought that emotions might run very high and disturb the baby. The judge hummed. That is the only commendable thing you have done lately, madam. I also have my doubts about giving custody to a man who has shown no interest in his child, other than paying the recommended child support since his birth. You noted last week that Mr. Sanders has made no attempt to visit the child or even hold him in his arms. This lack of attachment is troubling, even though I have positive feedback and recommendations from the residents of Reynardville. I only nodded as the same thoughts swirled around in my head. Even with the help of the residents of my new hometown, was I good enough to be Jenny's parent? He turned his full attention to me. Is there any possibility of you moving here and continuing to run your business? I understand you're opening an office here. Hearing this, Constance turned her head sharply. No, Your Honor, there is no reason to move here. As you probably know, this is not my hometown. I grew up 1,000 miles away and only came here for my education. I stayed here for the business opportunities, and then the opportunity to open a graphic design office with Miss Lapiro. Never, ever, anywhere have I felt as comfortable as I do in Reynardville. The entire community has not only welcomed me, but has been extremely supportive of not only my budding business, but of this endeavor as well. I have been humbled and overwhelmed by their recognition and support. I can't in good conscience leave there. He nodded. At this time, I am authorizing the dissolution of the marriage of Calvin Sanders and Constance Reynolds Sanders. I am also ordering the Department of Health and Human Services to conduct further investigation into the welfare of the child, Jenny Sanders Lapiro. For the immediate future, standard visitation with the child by the father, Calvin Sanders, will be limited to 1 day a week and every other weekend. When the child is 6 months old, custody will be split, and the child will be with Mr. Sanders 1 week out of every 3. At the end of the first year of life, I will revisit the issue of visitation and custody, and I'm inclined to split custody. 2 weeks with Mr. Sanders and 2 weeks with Miss Reynolds Sanders. I am also issuing an order that the child's name be changed from Sanders Lapiro to Sanders. I was shocked. I hadn't heard that Constance had legally formalized Jenny's last name as Sanders Lapiro. Another insult thrown in my face. I could feel the rage building in me. Courtroom or not, I was about to unleash all my rage on my wayward ex-wife. I think she felt it as she sat in her seat and clung to her lawyer for protection. I could barely hear the rest of the judge's words. I also order that Tony Lapiro is not to be alone with the child under any circumstances. She will not care for this child. If an investigation by the Department of Health shows that she is in any way affecting the welfare of the child, I will order that the child be removed from your home and immediately placed in the care of Mr. Sanders, who will be the sole custodial parent. He looked intently at Constance. Do you understand? Constance looked confused. Sir, we live together. Why can't Tony communicate with our daughter? My decision is based not only on the story of how she seduced you and forced your husband out of your life, but also on an investigation I ordered. I found that your husband was the driving force behind Miss Lapiro's business, which failed. Once he left, it was a foregone conclusion that the business would fail, despite the money you had invested in it. Clearly, Miss Lapiro is not the businesswoman she thinks she is. The partnership agreement she tried to force on him to make him the ultimate cuckold, and almost a slave to her, is also part of this decision. Also, it bothers me that you gave her so much money to try to save the business without any repayment schedule or contract. The fact that you didn't even try to split the money from the condo sale with your husband or get his involvement in the disposition or investment of that money. I am concerned about whether you are looking out for the best interest of your child when it comes to your lover. I realize that you have gained some notoriety as a representative of the dairy industry and that your daughter plays a significant role in that. Constance nodded. My investigator uncovered a plot by Miss Lapiro and your attorney to patent your daughter's name and likeness, become her agent, and profit from that fame now and in the future. His look spoke volumes. Jerry Caldwell was almost trembling with the urge to jump up and claim something in my favor. I was utterly bewildered at this turn of events. The rage swept from Constance to Tony. How could a man who was such a good friend be involved in such a despicable case? The judge was focused on Constance and paid no attention to us at all. Did you know about this? Constance looked as puzzled as I was. She looked at her lawyer. He couldn't return her gaze and looked away. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I assumed Jenny was represented by my agent. I signed the contracts, not Tony. I have no idea what her plan was or why she was doing this. The judge nodded. As to your living arrangements, I cannot determine where or with whom you live. I can only rule that Miss Lapiro is not to have unsupervised contact with your daughter. He turned to me. Mr. Sanders, I also cannot demand that you take this opportunity to get to know and establish a relationship with your daughter, but I will tell the Department of Health that I will recommend that Jenny Sanders be placed in the foster care system if you do not establish a family relationship with her in the event you need to remove her from the home where your ex-wife resides. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, I understand, and I will work to start dating as soon as possible. He nodded and hit the gavel on the pad, signaling the end of the hearing. Jerry turned to me and grinned. Now you're single, at least for 60 days, and free as a bird. Congratulations. I nodded and gave him a half smile. That kind of thing only favored lawyers. I was still hurt and angry. I wanted nothing more than to crush Tony with my bare hands, and this coming from a guy who never had to defend himself physically. I've certainly never been in the military or special forces. I hadn't practiced martial arts, and I didn't even know any tough guys who could fulfill my request if necessary. Jerry stood in the aisle as the judge invited opposing counsel forward to speak quietly. However, we could still hear him. Son, I want you to know that I am turning over all information about this disaster to the Bar Association. Expect to hear from the lawyers soon and be prepared to surrender your license. The lawyer looked duly chastened and only nodded his head. When he turned around, Constance was already in his face. How can you call yourself my representative? How can you do this to me? Are you trying to steal my daughter from me? She didn't let him answer before slapping him and turning to me. Cal, wait, please. I'm asking you to listen to me. I paused. I was going to have to deal with her for as long as we had a daughter in common, so I might as well start accepting that little fact. I didn't have to talk to her, though. She could just talk to me. Jerry stopped next to me and nodded. Please forgive me. I had no idea what Tony was doing or trying to do. I don't understand it at all. I'll abide by the judge's decision, even if it means I'll be living alone again. I won't deny you if you want to see Jenny. Furthermore, I want you to come to the condominium and meet her right now. Today, if you want. I can't bear the thought of losing her, and I can't bear the thought of not having her father in her life. Please come and meet her. She tentatively touched my sleeve as if she wanted to grab me and drag me along. I just pretended to be a statue and didn't even pull away. Her expression screwed up even more and she sighed, pulling away. I was hoping that once you recognized Jenny, you'd forgive me and maybe even let me come back to you in some form. I still love you. With an impassive look, I shrugged. She realized what she was talking about and backed away. Jerry stepped in. Miss Reynolds, why don't we arrange a neutral place where Cal and Jenny can meet? I will say on Cal's behalf that it is inadvisable for Miss Lapiro to be present at such a meeting, and that no contact should be attempted at this time. Constance nodded, then brushed away a few tears as she realized how she had been addressed. Part of my paperwork insisted that she revert to her maiden name. Now the last name Sanders would not be used by her or Tony if they married. They then arranged a time after lunch at a local park where I could see my daughter. Now, as I write this last part, I wish I could say that everything turned out sunshine and roses. But, as in real life, it turned out to be much more complicated than that. Jenny was very resistant to me. She cried every time I tried to pick her up until she was 3 months old. Finally, she got used to me. The visit went according to plan. When Jenny turned 6 months old, Constance weaned her off breast milk so that she would have no problem feeding her daughter when she was with me. I had to give up my plan to use a small apartment at the facility. The nice people at the Department of Health's Child Protective Services barely approved that apartment for the times I left her there. Once I started living with her every week out of 3, I needed a better and bigger place to live. Once again, the people of Reynardville stepped in and found a very nice home for Jenny and me. Constance moved out of Tony's, but I believe they got together whenever Jenny was with me and on those rare nights when Constance managed to find a babysitter. She made sure that Tony had absolutely no contact with Jenny. Jenny remained a child in commercials for the milk board, and Constance and I made sure that the money transferred into her account was invested in her future education and then into adulthood. I paid the required child support when Jenny was with Constance and put the same amount into a trust account when she was with me. Was I dating Emily? Emily decided a relationship with her boss wasn't kosher and decided to look elsewhere. I, on the other hand, found my next love in the most unassuming way possible. At a time when I could only see Jenny on weekends, I would make the 4-hour trip to where Constance and I lived. I rented a small apartment so that I would have an address for surprise visits from the CPS investigator. I figured the stress of the long drive would make Jenny more reluctant to meet me, so I'd leave early so I had time to see my staff. The business was growing and I needed to find an office manager. A little prickly little girl named Karen came into my life. She was no more than 5 feet tall and weighed about 100 pounds. She couldn't be called beautiful like Constance or Emily, but she was just beautiful. She had applied for the office manager position and had interviewed well. I was just wondering if she could keep my local design group focused and productive. I gave her a chance, and she took the reins, and along with Emily, got everyone working even better than before. Karen was my age and was also in a broken marriage. Her husband had gotten his secretary pregnant and left Karen, leaving her with 2 young children. When I first met the little ones, they immediately started calling me Uncle Cal. We danced around each other for quite a while. Until one Thursday afternoon, I walked into the office. I had already taken care of all the local business and was getting ready to take my usual desk to focus on work when Karen came up to me. I usually came in on Friday, made my inquiries and any necessary decisions. There weren't many since I had Emily and Karen, and then worked on my projects. I may have been the boss, but I was also the lead designer and had to put my best foot forward. This week, I showed up on Thursday to consult with Jerry Caldwell about incorporation and was ready to work until the appointed time. Karen came over and tried to sit her tiny back on the corner of my desk, but her height was not enough. After bouncing around a bit, she managed to grab onto the corner and wiggle around until she got comfortable. After that, she ruined my day at work, but changed my life. Look, I know you won't make the first move because of the current quid pro quo rules, so I'm going to make the first move. I think you're interested in me, and I'm certainly interested in you. If it helps us, I will submit a letter of resignation to make it more convenient for you to meet with me. I hope that's not necessary, but it is what it is. How would you like to have dinner at my place tonight? I may be a little naive when I remember what Constance and Tony have done behind my back, but I hope I'm not stupid. A very pleasant-looking woman who knew her worth and wasn't shy about expressing it was asking me out on a date. I immediately agreed to a date at her house. From there, we progressed from there. Finally, Emily and Karen came to me and offered to switch places. Karen wanted to be with me the whole time, and Emily was ready to date again and wanted to be in a bigger place with more choices. It was quite ironic when she chose one of my designers. Karen moved to Reynardville, but right into my house. We were married a couple months later, and her kids started calling me Cal instead of Uncle Cal. I wasn't trying to replace their father, as he wasn't a deadbeat dad, just foolishly had an affair and made life difficult for himself. When Jenny was 2 years old, Tony tried again to take control of her future. I don't know what her motives were, but the court quickly granted me custody and allowed Constance free visitation. Constance finally broke up with Tony when Tony found herself pregnant. It turned out that Tony wasn't the devoted woman Constance needed. Constance moved closer so she could see Jenny more often. She still shoots commercials and uses Jenny. These are good faces for the dairy industry. My business is growing. We are taking on larger projects in the surrounding major communities. I guess I'll have to open another satellite office soon. It's too bad Tony had to go off the rails. This could have been her success. You want to know more about Tony? Well, she stopped exercising during her pregnancy and gained about 50 pounds that she never lost. Her boyfriend turned out to be married and a coworker. She made such a fuss when he refused to acknowledge the pregnancy that they were both fired. Eventually, while looking for a new job, Tony ended up on Social Security and Medicaid benefits. Her son was born prematurely because Tony had eclampsia and was later diagnosed with autism. He is receiving special help to develop all of his natural abilities, but he has a long and difficult road ahead of him. Tony is now reportedly finding it even harder to attract men or women into relationships. And yes, I am happy. My life is turning out well. Thanks for asking. The end. If you haven't watched the first part, be sure to watch it. The link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.